Welcome to our presentation. This is Turning Obstacles into Opportunities, a student-staff partnership exploring the experience of disabled law students with blended learning. My name's Amanda Millmore from the University of Reading and the School of Law, and I'm delighted to be joined by three of my students. I have Lauren Fuller, who's a second year, Constantina Nuka, who's a finalist, and Will Page, who is a postgraduate student. They are all part of our student-staff partnership, and we have been exploring this year the varied experiences of our students with disabilities with the blended learning during the pandemic, and seeing what we can learn from this as well as what we can improve. So our partnership, just so you are aware, has been run entirely remotely this year. We haven't actually met in person. We've done it all via Microsoft Teams, and we have met virtually. We've collaborated with documents, and we are presenting virtually as well. And so I have 5 students, all who identify as having disabilities or long-term conditions. There's myself as one of the law school academics, along with 2 of my colleagues. And we also had the benefit of a university disability advisor who was supporting us and advising us. And together we have been working on trying to find out what works well and what doesn't for our students with disabilities, and also students more widely with blended learning. So this is our virtual partnership. The partnership came about because I was talking to a number of students who appeared to be really struggling with the blended learning experience, and it became apparent that a lot of them had disabilities or long-term conditions. And so I wanted to make sure that this group wasn't being unduly disadvantaged, and so recruited a partnership through our university email lists within the law school, and together got some volunteers, and the partners have been working really hard all year round to find out what other students think and also to share our recommendations. So we met together, we had some ice breaking, a bit of brainstorming about different experiences that students had had, and then we moved on to survey the whole cohort of law students to find out what the experiences more widely were. We followed this up with 2 focus groups, which the students will tell you about. They were focus groups run by students, for students, and I think that's a really fundamental thing to get good communication, and that has worked really well. So we had focus groups, and that was just with students with disabilities. And then we've come together and collated our recommendations, and we've separated them into short-term and long-term recommendations. And we're now at the dissemination stage, both locally and nationally. So I'll hand over to Lauren, who is going to explain to you a little bit about the survey that we ran and some of the findings we had from that.
Thank you, Amanda. The other students and I worked alongside Amanda to create some questions that we would like to ask all of the law students in regards to blended learning and how it has affected them. And as can be seen from the image and graph on this slide, we managed to get quite a variety of students answering. And the way we shared these questions around was either through email listings, Facebook posts, and messages in the student group chats. So moving on to the next slide, we can see the responses that students gave. Although the overall experience of blended learning doesn't look too negative, there are quite a lot of negative responses that can't be ignored. And the main area which seemed to have proved most difficult for students was the live online small group sessions. And this is something that I found particularly difficult at first as well. As someone with anxiety, I don't do very well with change at all, and it did take quite a while to get used to. I eventually started to feel more comfortable contributing in the smaller groups. However, for some modules, we had larger groups, like 20 people, and that was still a bit too much for me. And another issue that I had struggled with particularly was Blackboard structure and layout as well. I'm not the only one, but I became quite stressed and confused with what weeks we were, trying to correlate timetable weeks to lecture weeks, and it was just very confusing. One module, in fact, listed all of the lectures on one channel and hadn't split them into weekly folders, so I'd feel extremely overwhelmed when trying to find that week-specific lecture. I just keep scrolling and scrolling. But some things were working well, as can be seen on the next slide. So I can't speak on face-to-face teaching as I've not experienced that this year due to personal health conditions. However, module roadmaps have been something that I have been extremely appreciative of, as it's made figuring out what week it is so much easier and managing the workload because it sets out exactly what I need to do that week. And the shorter lectures and the fact that they're pre-recorded has been immensely helpful for me as well, because sometimes Wi-Fi cut out when I was at home. There's quite a lot of people at home, so sometimes the Wi-Fi just was not strong enough. And the fact that they're pre-recorded meant that I could come back to them whenever, and I could use the Pomodoro technique and have the ability to pause and take a break if I was getting a little bit overwhelmed. And if we move on to the next slide, you can see that I'm not the only one who preferred the shorter lectures, and the most popular length for video recording was 20 minutes, which I think is the ideal time for the Pomodoro technique. So overall for me, the blended learning experience has been interesting, and in some ways I prefer the pre-recorded shorter lectures, but I do miss being in the lecture hall and the university experience. I prefer the live tutorial sessions as I can sort of hide and not have my camera on, and I didn't sort of get the fear that I'd be talking over anyone due to the raise hand function. But moving on from this questionnaire, we will talk about the focus groups, which Constantina will be discussing.
So as can be clear, focus groups were the core of this project because it's a partnership for students with students. So we created 2 focus groups, which we split amongst us who were part of the partnership, and we were leading we tried to create a friendly atmosphere where students were able to address their concerns and discuss the findings of the survey, and we were the ones facilitating in this partnership. And very nicely, at the end of the focus group, Amanda Millmore gave us the opportunity to send us some lovely brownies. So as you can see from the tweet of my friend Selden. So if we now move on to the next slide, we through the focus groups, certain ideas came about from the students, which really correlate to the findings of the survey. First of all, what was said was that there would be scheduled lecture release dates. So for every academic to upload the lecture on the same day, let's say Monday or let's say Friday of the week before, in order to give the students some consistency and ensure how they can plan their weeks ahead. Because when you have in-person lectures, you know exactly when you have those lectures. Another interesting point that was provided through the focus groups was the need of more live drop-in and Q&A sessions in order to give an opportunity for students to ask questions the same way they would do at the end of in-person lectures. Then, one of the very, very important things that came out to the focus group were the idea of study groups. So Amanda Millmore managed to create 46 groups amongst postgraduate and undergraduate students with 194 students. So that was a great opportunity to reduce exam stress and ensure that there are some people that you can discuss and share your concern or even complain about the modules that you don't like or you find hard. Because they're an important tool both for academic purposes but also for emotional support, which is something that we really needed through this period. Moreover, one other important short-term recommendation that was a success was a video that was created by Selden, the other member of our partnership, and Amanda, in order to help us understand the process of getting extenuating circumstances for assessments, etc. Because many students were unsure how the process works and what they need to do. So moving now to the next slide, looking the results of the focus group, if we put them on long term, four main things came out. The first of all, as it's no surprise, was that lectures need to be around 20 minutes. This was a very clear result, as students need to ensure that they don't get what is known as Zoom or Teams fatigue, and to be able to concentrate. Also, another important thing was captures for live lectures that we help students with disabilities tremendously, and also students who don't have English as a first language. Moreover, what is a key thing that has helped in terms of lectures is the fact there needs to be some accommodation when we return back from the online learning environment to in-person, especially for the first years who have never experienced in-person lecture before. When now considering tutorials, there needs to be a consistent class group amongst the core modules. So for example, in year 1 and year 2, where everyone does the same modules, or most of them the same, because those are the key modules of the LLB. There seems to be the same group of students across every single group, module group, yeah. And also, there needs to be a manageable size. So we don't have too large or too small tutorial groups in order to ensure that there's effective learning. We're now moving on to the third long-term recommendation. This is the roadmaps. So that, as Lauren said at the beginning of this presentation, those roadmaps will be provided weekly and explain what the aim of each week is per module, what's the recommended reading, further reading, and what tasks they are available, or even how many videos exist per that topic, chapter, unit, however you want to call it. The final one, and in my opinion, one of the most important things that came out of this study was that the Blackboard is to have a uniform layout across all the modules. So that's this idea of consistency is so important for students with disabilities, but also for students who don't have disability, in order to get clarity. So all of the modules have the same layout, that as we'll see later, we'll give some examples of that, where there will be like a single location for links in order to join online classes, and where you can find your modules document, etc. And also, an idea regarding Blackboard was that the tutors or lecturers should not use email when they would send announcement, and instead use the announcement function in Blackboard. So now we will move on further. This is an example of a good practice of a module overview as seen by Talents Business School, where you can see that week 1 this is your topic, week 2, 3, 4, and you can see the date as well. So each student knows which topic they have to read per week, or if they miss, a topic that week, what's the next one, how to catch up. So this is key in order for students to organize their studying. So moving now on to a good practice of a weekly module. This is for international law, and you can see which lecturer will teach you that week, when the week commences, what's the topic, what tasks they're available, are there any exercises they need to undertake, etc. So this is like a module example of what we recommend that should be followed. And here you can see again from international law, a model layout of how the Blackboard should be. So on the one side you have week 1, week 2, week 4, and then you click there and you see its relevant topic, module documents, etc. You have a specific place for past papers, announcement, and this layout should be followed on every single module instead of having different ones. This is what has been recommended by the students throughout the study.
So one interesting idea that came out from our student focus groups was the idea of camera on classes. And these would be voluntary classes that students would sign up to attend, where camera on functionality would be mandatory. Now, whilst this does have a few technical limitations that students might have, whether it be internet or lack of technology, this could see an increase of engagement and help student focus within these classes. So it's an interesting idea to sort of experiment with, to see whether there's a desire for students and an uptake to attend these classes where they will be visible to not only the staff but also their peers. Now we're going to just quickly consider dissemination. Now, we identified 4 strands where dissemination really is key. The first one, where we've already seen an impact, is through our recommendations feeding towards the university or the law school's Blackboard working group, which helps enhance our virtual learning environment to ensure best practice is evidenced within our law school, but also across the university. And as we've seen within this presentation, the functionality of Blackboard is really important to students in making sense of the content and sort of visualizing the roadmap of the whole year. Also, conferences like this within both Reading University and across the national academic community are really important when disseminating all our different ideas, and sharing this best practice can help enhance the student experience of, well, not just only disabled students, but also other students within a variety of institutions. We also have reported our findings back to the Student Staff Partnership, which is a termly meeting where our student voice representatives collaborate with staff in order to share ideas to enhance the student experience within the law school. Through sharing back to students, we've helped close the feedback loop, because the research participants within this study were also students, and this helps create greater visibility and transparency to processes within the law school, helping encourage students to get involved with sharing ideas in the future. And finally, we've made use of informal communication channels, whether it be Facebook, WhatsApp groups, or taking advantage of our wonderful Law Society. We use these platforms to help share information and encourage students to engage with the different initiatives and contribute their ideas. So whilst each strand of dissemination is really important, not just for sharing our research output, but it also helps develop substantive attributes such as our community and transparent, and helps enhance the transparency of our student representation. And this representation is really important, especially now, because the students that are represented within this study often are overlooked within many aspects of higher education, and their voices either get lost or aren't heard. So therefore, when through ensuring that students are participating within this study, we can really ensure that everyone is heard. So consequently, whilst this project has a measurable impact within the structure of teaching and learning, we can also see this having an impact on broader cultural changes within higher education. And these changes are built upon the foundation of student and staff partnerships, which have a symbolic power, reminding both staff and students of how important it is to work together. That's all I have to say on this.
Thank you very much for listening to our presentation. We hope you found it helpful, whether it's the actual recommendations or also how to work in partnership with students in a virtual environment. We thoroughly recommend it to everybody. And if you do have any questions, my contact details are there on the slide if I can help anybody.